Some people try to make the point that AI is replacing researchers, not one-to-one, and definitely not with the current state of technology. But there are definitely certain developments that are interesting. Come up with a question like, hey, this would be interesting to research, and then we talk about it, and after 20 minutes we were like, okay, maybe it's not really something we should do, or there's other priorities or something like that.
Okay, cool. So yeah, great to have you here, Alex. It'd be cool, yeah, just to learn a bit more about you because I'm sure people are familiar with Condens. Maybe you've seen your name, obviously, as the founder of Condens or the co-founder, but I'm sure they're interested in knowing a bit more about you, your background, etc. So yeah, I'll let you take it away.
Sure, and thanks for having me. Yeah, I have a business background. I studied business administration and have yeah, coming from that field, and started my career in finance, and worked in a startup and supported getting venture funding, and then moved to product management. But also in that role, my focus was mostly on the connection to customers, developing the product from that perspective, and building this relation to the customer.
Mm,
But this was my entry sort of into the tech world, and yeah, this is where I learned a lot, and also got to see the entire product development sort of cycle or phase, which was
cool.
super interesting. And I did that for a couple of years, and yeah, then that's where we met my co-founders, and we decided to found Condens, which of course there were many steps in between. It was not
Yeah.
such a gradual process, but in short, this is sort of my background and how I
Mm.
arrived at this place where I'm currently.
Cool, cool. Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm sure there was many more steps and twists and turns before you ended up from business product and then to Condense. I'm just intrigued. Obviously, you mentioned you had a business background and then you moved into product. Do you want to go into a bit more detail of why that came about and how you did that as well?
Yeah. Well, I studied business without a clear aspiration of where I want to go.
Mm,
Many people going to business, they either become, consultants or, working typical business roles. And when I studied, I sort of more and more got interested in startups, and learned this entirely new field, which was not taught at our business school or like in my bachelor's at all.
mm,
But it got super interesting, and then later on, I decided to focus on that, and luckily was able to join a study program which was interdisciplinary. So I had the opportunity to work not only with business fellow business students, but also with people from computer science, from engineering, mechanical engineering, even law and psychology, like a very
mm,
interdisciplinary group. And this opened up my worldview a lot, and gave me this perspective of not only building a startup, but also bringing in
mm.
these perspectives of these other students, which was super interesting for me. And that's when I decided, hey, this is exactly where I want to be. This is interesting. This is where I can create valuable things for
Mm.
others, and move things forward. And that's why I made this transition, which I'm super happy about.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, it's also nice as well to hear that like honest explanation or feeling as well that you went into this, I don't know, studying business without any clear aspirations. Because sometimes we feel that if you're doing that, or when you do go and study something, that you have to already have your end goal in mind. Like you're going in full of confidence, like, yes, exactly what I want to do. Or I love business. That might be the case for some people. But I had a similar experience. So when I studied IT or information technology, like more hardware practitioner, I went into it thinking, well, I know I want to be in the tech world in some form, but I wasn't yet sure what that entailed or what that would look like. And I think a lot of the time it's also good to have that, I don't know, like experimentation, like just discovering what it is that, I don't know, fits you, your personality. And that might take a bit of trial and error and take a bit of time to discover. And there's nothing wrong in that. So if there are people watching or listening that are unsure at the moment, that's
Mhm.
super okay, but continue to discover. That's super important. Um,
Yes, yes, totally agree.
yeah, I don't want to steal your thunder, Alex.
Mhm.
Um, Now, in terms of, so how long ago is this, just to give a bit of perspective for obviously
Yeah.
for our listeners?
Sorry, you mean how long ago we founded, it was since we founded Condens?
No, like how long ago since you entered into, let's say, product and studying product, etc.
Makes sense, makes sense. So it's probably 10 years since I started working. And as I
Okay,
said, the first initial month or years were more in finance. It was still a startup, and
okay,
it was a very dynamic field.
mm,
It was more in a finance role, but then
okay,
I transitioned to a product role, which yeah, was also driven by my curiosity and by my interest in building things and
okay,
developing things and moving things forward, which I
mm,
felt like, yeah, product development was or the product management was more the field for that.
mm, okay,
And that was the case. It was a super interesting time. As I said, it was a startup. It was also related to hardware, which also makes it very interesting and
mm,
also challenging at the same time.
sure,
Um, and that's when I learned, like, yeah, in product management, how challenging it can be to
mm,
work with all of those stakeholders, to have all of these puzzle pieces sort of in mind and try to arrange them and make them fit together. It was an
absolutely.
interesting time.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I can imagine. And so you say product management. What did your role entail, and how did that develop maybe over time?
Yeah, yeah. So in the beginning, the company was basically developing a technology from university. It was like a research driven sort of approach, and the
Oh,
idea was like
okay.
how can we find applications to that? Like how can we find use cases? So it was in the
Mm,
beginning was rather broad, looking at
okay.
different ways to apply this technology. But then later on, I specialized in one sort of use case or one area where we could apply that. And then here the goal was really to find product market fit is essentially seeing
Mm,
like how can we make what we have fit and further developed to an addressable market. And it was really looking from both sides, like what exactly is the market? How do we define that? Talking
mm,
to people, talking to potential customers, and then at the same time developing the technology further and making that work. But as I said, my interpretation of the role was rather focused on the market, on the customers. I was talking to customers a lot, spending time with
mm,
customers on site. Um, and then, of course, I was part of a team that took care of other parts that you would probably may also include in product management.
mm.
Um, yeah, that was that time where it was still very early and it was definitely pre-product market fit in that phase.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Typical early startup environment.
Yeah.
I've been there too.
Mhm.
Also, I'd be interested to hear as well your experience when it comes to UX. So I imagine how long did it take for you to come across user experience, and what was that like for you?
Yeah. I mean, I had touch points in university already. As I said, I had
Okay.
this
Yeah.
privilege of being part of this interdisciplinary study program where
Mm,
UX was at least taught to some extent. This was the first touch points.
mm,
But then really, it was only the case in 2018, 2019 when together with my two co-founders, we decided to found a company and we looked into different areas.
mm.
And we looked very broadly, like there was not a case where we had like the idea for comments in mind from day
Okay.
one or something like that. It was a very broad search
Mm,
basically. But my co-founder Max, he has a design background, and he sort of brought in this idea of looking into the UX field, and then a
mm,
couple of other things came together. But to be honest, when we started looking into UX research specifically, I had very little knowledge of what a UX
mhm.
researcher does. I could have like maybe come up with something like that, but I had no evidence or no real knowledge
Mm,
what user researchers do.
mm,
And we spent 5 or 6 weeks full time, just conducting interviews and learning
Wow.
and immersing ourselves in the market, which was extremely
Mm,
valuable. And then, of course,
mm,
ever since I've been talking to user researchers, but that was really the first intense touch point
mm.
where I learned about it.
Wow, wow. That's cool. You didn't know what UX researcher was, but then to find out you did interviews, which is which is why UX researcher does. So you're already in the mindset, which is cool. Um, so that's interesting as well. So you and your two co-founders, your initial let's say push to found a company was just a desire to found a company. It wasn't because you speak to many founders and they found a company because, or they founded a company because, I don't know, they were missing something from their tool set, or they were trying to achieve something, couldn't achieve it, or they saw a problem in the field and thought, yeah, I can provide a solution. Your driving force was, we want to create something, we want to create a new tool or a new program or something.
Absolutely right. And there were many people, or a couple of people, who would say that we got it backwards. Like you have to find the idea first, and or something like that. For us, I mean, we had the team, which was good. So
Mm,
I had my two co-founders, and again, we were like had different skills that we could bring to the table. I had a business background. My co-founder Max has a design background. My co-founder Mate has a computer science background. So we had this diverse skill set, which was valuable,
mm,
and we had the desire to found a company and build something sort of from the ground up and create something that is valuable.
mm,
But I agree, it's probably not the usual way of how companies and startups are created. But for us, it was totally fine, and we approached it like
yeah.
that. We had this broad search, and we looked into very, very different areas, and then
Mm.
luckily ended up in UX research.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of like having always a traditional way to do something. I always think there is no right or wrong way. Like whatever works for you, whatever. If it's successful, then it was the right way. So, there's not always obviously there are the tried and tested routes, which maybe have a high percentage of success. But if it worked for you, it worked for you. And obviously, Condens is now a recognized UX research tool. So yeah, obviously was successful. So yeah, could you go into a bit more detail maybe into how Condens started? So obviously you did this research, your co-founder design background, maybe introduce the idea of a tool for UX research, you interview researchers. What were the steps like after that? What happened?
Yeah, I think this 4 to 6 weeks of intensive research on researchers, those
Mm,
were really fundamental and
mm,
important, because this is where we first of all had a good understanding of the role and the tasks and what researchers are doing, and also the challenges. And we also saw a clear gap. There
yeah.
was 2018, 2019, there were very few tools out there, and most researchers were still working with general purpose tools like Word,
Mm,
Excel files,
yeah.
struggling to work with audio and video recordings, struggling to handle participant privacy, struggling to present findings and search findings. So in principle, basically what Condens is solving still today. So we had this very good
Mm,
understanding. Plus, we also had a very good understanding in terms of like go to market, like who are we addressing? So it was not
mm,
this way, yeah, we're solving this way problem for potentially someone, but it was like we had a clear sort of persona in
okay.
mind, and had a clear understanding of their problems. And this is when
Mm,
we decided, hey, it seems like a good time to get started here. And
mm.
then we started to build the first prototype and try to get the first users.
Nice, nice. Thanks for going into detail around that. And so obviously as the product as it is now, have there been like some major, let's say, product shifts or roadmap shifts in the original idea of Condense, or is what the product is now, is that what you three always imagined it to be?
Um, and to be fair, we didn't have this big vision or
Mm,
sort of long-term 5-year plan or something like that. We had a concrete understanding of the problems that we wanted to solve. These
mm,
were supporting and streamlining the analysis process and making the access to existing research easier. And this is
Yeah.
still the case. Like the fundamental problems that we're trying to solve are still the same.
Yeah.
Of course, the way we solve them has changed, and there has been many changes and things happening along the way. I remember when transcription was a thing back in like 2019, 2020 or so, and this was like the new kid on the block, and it was suddenly like everyone was happy to have transcription. So there were several of those things. We integrated a whiteboard on the way, and now, of course, generative AI is playing a big role. So the ways how these problems are solved are changing, but the fundamental problems haven't changed to us,
Yeah.
which is nice, but at the same time also makes it interesting because there's lots of change.
Of course, of course. Yeah. So there's always things to keep improving on, and obviously as the field shifts, you can kind of move with it. That's really cool. So, and maybe just for our listeners that maybe haven't used Condens or maybe aren't familiar with the tool itself. I told you, I think last time when we were organizing this call, that it was the first tool that I ever used as a UX researcher when I was learning. So it's kind of cool for me to interview you. But yeah, just for our listeners, could you just explain what the tool does, how a UX researcher can use it in their workflow?
Yeah. So Condens basically supports two things. One is the analysis process. So once you got your research data, recordings from Zoom, Microsoft Teams, notes, transcripts, you can put this to Condens, and Condens helps to streamline that. It starts with automatically generated transcripts. There's options to highlight different statements, to create video clips, to extract insights across different interviews, to see patterns, to see overlaps, whiteboard affinity mapping. So basically everything that you would need from going from raw data to something that you can share with your stakeholders, and something that is called an insight or a result.
Okay.
And this is the basis, and has been the basis, of course, as I said, with improvements to the way how we solved it. But this is still the case. How can we support researchers in making sense of the data? And the other aspect that Condens supports is this case of the research repository. So as an organization, as we accumulate research and knowledge, how can we make the best use of that? We all know that the research is expensive, and we try to only do new research whenever we need to. So the idea is how can we make best use of that? Of course, search that, share it with people, embed that in the tools that others are using, like Slack and Microsoft Teams. So this is the second kind of use case, but of course they go hand in hand. It's in the tool. This is not separated. It's like, of course, integrated, because the idea is that whenever you do research, this also should be made easily accessible to your stakeholders and people in the organization.
That's super interesting. Yeah. I remember those features when I was using it in my previous roles. No, it is really useful, and that, as you say, it all goes hand in hand, and having that repository that is easily accessible to everyone in the organization. And it also links with the tools that they use and have easy access to. That makes research also more efficient, because maybe you're not going over research that has already been conducted. It's something you already know, and you're not kind of, let's say, wasting time and money for the organization. Obviously, if you need to do like ulterior research, then that's another thing. But it does, from my experience using Condens, it does kind of speed up that process as a researcher and as a team as a whole. So, no, I can vouch for that. And for the future, in terms of Condens in your organization, obviously, there's been a lot of changes recently, obviously with the introduction of AI, as everybody's familiar with. Has that changed Condens in terms of a product and where you envision it moving forward, or are you still in the mindset of like, no 5-year plan, let's just move with the market and with the field as it grows?
We still don't have a 5-year plan, and I think in a field like ours, I would say it probably doesn't make sense to stick to something like 5 years down the road. I mean, there have been 5 years since we have started Condens, so there's no way we could have imagined what we're at. I think what we're still doing is focusing on the problems of our customers and of our users, and solving them as good as we can. Of course, we do have a certain, let's call it, scope. We are aware of the areas that we want to be in, and aware that if we were spreading too far, it will probably be difficult for us to keep up with the
Mm,
depth and quality that we want to provide. But our main goal is continues to be like working with our customers, and now we are in the luxury of having like a customer base who we can interact with and talk to and
mm,
understand what they're up to and what their new challenges
mm.
and tasks are. So we can work with that, of course, with a certain direction in mind, but not a fixed
Okay.
plan or roadmap. Our team also is very allergic to the term roadmap as such,
Sorry, I
because
mentioned
we
it.
no, it's fine. I mean, we have, yeah, of course, we're planning things and have an idea of what's coming next, but it's not
Mm,
that it's like fixed
yeah,
timelines, and definitely not for the long future.
sure. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's how we approach that.
Yeah, no, and I think that's also wise as well. In my experience working with roadmaps, it's hard to work with one anyway because it changes so often. So a roadmap, yeah, it kind of gives you an idea of what could come, but it's always changed and moved and deadlines shifted. And as you learn,
Yeah.
especially in research, as you learn new things, and so yeah, I can see the reasoning behind that. Cool, excellent. So obviously you're always speaking to researchers, I imagine. Obviously your team hears back from researchers as you learn from their experiences, what they need, etc. From your point of view, I know there's a lot of talk at the moment with the role of a UX researcher, that maybe with the introduction of AI or just this mindset around UX and where to position researchers in organizations, etc. From your point of view, where do you see the UX researcher role at the moment, and where do you think it's going to go to? Just from your point of view, obviously nothing's fixed, but just for also people who are new to the field as well, like, and they're struggling to position themselves, or they're confused with, okay, do I market myself as a product researcher, UX research? Because there's so many terminologies now. So
Mhm.
yeah, what's your opinion and take on this?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for mentioning that nothing is fixed. And we also, as a
Mm,
disclaimer, we have to be careful with these, trends or what things are developing, because it's very individual to each organization,
yeah.
and how also, again, how people interpret certain roles.
Mm,
Um, when we see those things, we also have to take it with a grain of salt and see, like, does this
yeah.
apply to my organization or to my situation?
Mm,
For example, AI, of course, it is something that is happening, and it's something that we are seeing, and we definitely see that it improves it can highlight the productivity and increase the productivity of researchers.
mm,
What On the contrast, what we're not seeing is that it's replacing a researcher one to
mm,
one. That's at least the current state of technology, and what we're seeing currently is not the case, although it's
mm.
sometimes proclaimed on social media, and some people um, try to make the point that AI is replacing researchers, um, not one to one, and definitely not with the current state of technology.
Mm,
But there are definitely certain developments that are interesting. I see, for example, that many organizations are progressing in their research and UX maturity overall.
mm,
So there is more understanding for research, for UX in general. There's more need for that. And that, for example, does require a certain change or provides opportunity for a certain change, because
mm,
I think this is a good problem to have. When as a researcher, you suddenly see like, hey, there's not only demand for research from the product team, but also from marketing, from support,
mm,
from the executive um, management, and this provides new opportunities, or there's just in general more requests for research.
mm,
So that would be one sign where, as a researcher, I would be like, hey, this is cool, but also like, how do I change, and how do I adapt, and how do I move forward in terms of going from doing the research, executing the research,
mm,
to scaling it and bringing it
mm,
to the next level. And there's a couple of things that we're seeing, for example, with our customers who are doing amazing jobs in scaling research across the organization and bringing it into established organizations who have existed for up to 50 years, 100 years in some
wow.
cases, and bring in user research, and suddenly there's demand for that, and bring it up,
Mm,
and seeing how they yeah, um, implement processes,
Mm,
trainings, operations, and also tools to
mm,
enable people to do research. This is just one of the examples where it's like, hey, there's a really big opportunity to have even more impact with research beyond doing the studies and doing the projects.
mm. Yeah, no, that's really true. And just from my personal experience of working in mainly in startups, that many times UX research or the UX researcher is just put with the design team, and the idea
Mhm.
they work with designers, they provide research to designers that then work with it, and but the role of a researcher, I noticed, was that I can go and work with the marketing team, and they're asking me questions, or what are you noticing about these trends, or even on social media, what have you noticed? And speaking with these various users, do they look at social media? Do they look at this? And you're able to provide them a lot of data that they can use then to go and do marketing campaigns, or know maybe how to position themselves in email invites or whatever that might be. And then obviously there's a business team, the sales team. So your data and what you're finding from users as a researcher can be valuable for all areas of the business, and as you say, even executives or CEOs. And
Mhm.
what do you think a researcher can do if they are maybe starting a new role now, or they're early on in their role, and they are in the UX design team, almost in a support
Mhm.
role? How could they? What should they do to move themselves maybe into a more, not into a more prominent position, but into a position where they can show like what they're finding out, and that they can become more established in the organization in terms of a powerful good for the whole organization?
Yeah. Um, well, of course, it depends between
Sure.
organization and what the
Yeah.
expectation of the role is. If the
Mm.
expectation of the role is to conduct usability studies
Sure.
and
Yeah.
so on, and then deviating from that extremely is probably not a good idea.
No.
But there's certain things that researchers can do. I think it starts with questioning the the research questions and the projects
Mm.
that they're working on in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
I see that myself. I mean, I look at research and work with researchers every day, but at the same time, I'm also a founder. And luckily, we do have a researcher in our team
Mm.
who I regularly work with. And sometimes I come up with questions. And one thing that she really does well is she challenges like the questions that I have, or helps me sharpen them and frame them best, basically.
Mm.
So I think this is a big value. And sometimes we're like I come up with a question, we'll be like, hey, this would be interesting to research, and then we talk about it, and after 20 minutes we'll be like, okay, maybe it's not really something we should do, or there's other priorities or
Yeah.
something like that. So I guess it starts with that, like not only taking things in terms of
Mm.
research questions and projects, but
Mm.
also challenging the things and also being proactive in talking to other stakeholders and seeing what's relevant for them, especially
Mm.
in today's environment, understanding what's relevant for the business overall. Like, what is the business struggling with? What is the main priorities and topics for the management and for the company
Mm.
overall, and seeing if research can support with that. Of course, always working with the manager and working with like the setting that is there. You don't want to, of course, especially as you're starting new, offend people or come in and be like, hey, I
Mm.
know how things should be done. But there's definitely ways to to see if the projects that as a researcher you're working on are the most relevant ones for the organization overall. And
Mm.
I think a bit of challenging and pushing back doesn't
Mm.
hurt, and,
No.
and maybe changes some things.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, completely agree. And yeah, thanks for giving your advice on that.
Mm.
Cool. So we've kind of covered everything that I wanted to cover in terms of you, Condens, etc. And I always like to end the interview with just some advice from the person I'm interviewing. So today, yourself, for a
Mm.
UX researcher. So could be something that you've heard yourself in the past in terms of advice given to you, or it could be just something you've learned along the way that you would like to leave as a piece of advice for someone new or early on in their career or trying to enter the field. What would your piece of advice be?
Um, Something that resonates with me recently is this idea of thinking the research role beyond the execution of research projects.
Mm,
This is the core. This will stay the core. Like having this rigor in methodology, knowing how to conduct research. This will always be the core, I think. But I think there's opportunity beyond that.
mm,
we talked about understanding the business goals overall, understanding where's the business heading, what is relevant to certain decision makers and stakeholders, being resourceful in terms of how do I get data? It doesn't always have to be new data that I generate. Maybe there's interesting data I can bring in from other teams or existing data that I can use, and also bringing in other stakeholders and who are potentially interested in doing research in order to scale the impact and have more impact in the organization. This is definitely not easy and not something that happens overnight, but I think in the long run really helps to shape an organization essentially by bringing a research-centric mindset into the company.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think, that demonstrating the power that research can have, not just for product and design, but for the whole organization. So it's a really good piece of advice. So thank you for sharing it.
My pleasure.
And thanks for coming onto the podcast. It's been a big privilege to interview you. As I said, for me, it's kind of going back to when I was first starting out, and it's cool to interview you. So thanks for giving your time, because I know you're really busy, and I'm sure all of our listeners appreciate it as well, and will have learned a lot from today's interview.
Thanks so much for giving me a chance to share and for the invitation. And if you want to hear more about Condens or me personally, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm sharing interesting things about research that I'm learning as we're all continuously learning. So it would be a pleasure to interact there.
Absolutely. Yeah, for all of our listeners and watchers, I'll be tagging in obviously Condens and also Alex into all of the promotions. So if you want to follow him, I follow him, and he's got a lot of nice, cool things on my feed. So highly recommend it. So thank you.